You are in the hidden stage. You think you are an amateur, but you are not. You have done the work. You understand the technical analysis. You have studied the charts, and your backtesting results are undeniably profitable. You know the exact conditions that define a high-probability setup. You can articulate your edge perfectly to anyone who asks. Yet when the screen is live and the money is real, you lose. Why? Because you are trapped by the tyranny of action. This is the central paradox of the intermediate trader. You have spent hundreds of hours learning what to do, but your failure comes from doing too much. You have convinced yourself that trading is a performance art, that your value is measured by the number of clicks you make or the minutes you spend in a trade. This is the addiction to the screen. It is the need to be busy, masquerading as professionalism. The reason your backtests are profitable is simple. The backtest requires patience. It forces you to wait for the exact moment the rule is met. The backtest has no ego, no fear of missing out, and no need to justify its existence by forcing a trade in weak conditions. When you are looking backward, you are a disciplined genius. But when you are looking forward, you become a gambler obsessed with motion. The market is the ultimate mirror. It reflects your internal need for stimulation and punishes your impatience with surgical precision. You know the setup is not perfect. You know the risk-to-reward ratio is slightly compromised. But the urge hits you, that twitch, that internal pressure that demands you participate. You tell yourself, "It's close enough." Stop. That phrase, "it's close enough," is the most expensive sentence in the trading dictionary. When you enter a trade that is close enough, you are not trading your strategy. You are trading your anxiety. You are essentially paying a psychological tax just to be involved. This impulsive entry immediately costs you. It costs you slippage, it costs you mental capital, and it costs you the optimal placement for your stop loss. You have already guaranteed a lower profit factor before the trade has even moved one tick in your favor. We often confuse market patience with life patience. In life, patience is passive. It means waiting for a bus or waiting for a reply to an email. It often implies stagnation. But in trading, patience is not passive. Market patience is strategic aggression. It is the coiled spring. It is the willingness to let 90% of the noise pass you by so that you can apply maximum force to the 1% of opportunities that truly matter. It is a decision to conserve energy until the perfect target appears. Subscribe now, like this video, and leave a comment. By doing that, you help more people see this message, and you let me know this work is not in vain. The greatest psychological enemy you face is not greed or fear, but the deep-seated, internalized need to be busy. Why do we have this need? Because stillness is terrifying. Stillness forces you to confront the reality that you are not in control of the market. It forces you to sit with the ambiguity. It forces you to look at your own discipline, or lack thereof, without the distraction of an open position. You are running from the silence. You are substituting low-quality action for high-quality waiting. Think about the trades that truly hurt your account this month. Were they trades you had to wait hours for? Or were they trades you forced within the first 30 minutes of the session because you felt you had to make something happen? They were the forced trades. They were the trades born of the belief that if you aren't trading, you aren't working. This is a professional lie. The ultimate measure of professional discipline is not how many trades you take, but how many bad trades you successfully refuse. Your goal is not maximizing activity. Your goal is maximizing capital preservation and psychological clarity. The road out of the hidden stage is counterintuitive. It requires subtraction. It requires you to stop trying to add new indicators, new systems, or new mentors, and instead focus on eliminating the actions that betray your existing edge. We are going to define the single most powerful psychological weapon an intermediate trader can deploy. It is the weapon that destroys the tyranny of action, eliminates the need to be busy, and forces you to confront the market only when the odds are overwhelmingly in your favor. It is the zero-trade day, and understanding how to execute it is the first step toward genuine freedom. The zero-trade day is not a passive surrender to boredom. It is an active, highly disciplined defense of your capital. And to execute that defense, you must understand the critical difference between passive patience and active patience. Passive patience is just resignation. It is sitting in front of the screen, staring blankly, hoping for a sign, allowing the noise to seep into your decision-making framework. It is the feeling of powerlessness. Active patience is a high-level cognitive function. It is the deep, focused observation of structure. It is the vigilant protection of capital. When you are waiting, you are not doing nothing. You are performing the single most important action. You are validating your system against the current reality of the chart. This validation requires something called pre-commitment. You must design your rules, your entry criteria, and your maximum risk when your heart rate is low, when the market is closed, and when the adrenaline is absent. These are the cold, logical rules of engagement. The moment you are in front of the live chart, you are no longer a designer. You are an executor. If you let the hot, immediate desire for action override the cold, logical rules you set hours or days ago, you have already lost. The wait becomes the ultimate test of integrity between the disciplined trader you want to be and the impulsive trader you currently are. Every successful trade exists in 4 distinct states. State 1, the waiting phase, where the edge is forming but not yet confirmed. State 2, the execution phase, the precise moment of entry. State 3, the management phase, handling the profit and loss fluctuations. State 4, the review phase. The intermediate trader, the one trapped in the cycle of self-sabotage, skips State 1 entirely. They jump from boredom directly to execution. They see a flicker of movement, a volatile spike, or a headline event, and they instantly call it an opportunity. They operate without the foundation of confirmation. This is why you feel frantic. You bypass the most critical stage of the entire process. Stop skipping the wait. So, what exactly do you do during this mandatory waiting phase? You run a rigorous mental checklist. Is the primary trend still intact? Has the volatility contracted to the required level for my specific strategy? Have all 3 of my entry criteria aligned perfectly? You are not waiting for a trade. That is the wrong dialogue. You are defending your capital against a poor trade. That is the critical shift in internal conversation. You are not a customer hoping to buy something. You are a gatekeeper protecting resources. Every minute spent waiting for the perfect setup is a minute where you prevented a death by 1,000 cuts scenario. You are actively preserving the fuel needed for the rocket when the conditions are finally optimal. Think of the apex predator. They spend 99% of their time motionless, conserving every ounce of energy, observing the environment with terrifying stillness. They do not chase every shadow or every fleeting movement. They wait for the moment of highest probability, where the energy expenditure is minimal and the reward is maximal. The market is not a race, it is a hunt. Impatience is the desperate, frantic energy of the prey, not the calculated stillness of the hunter. When you master the wait, something profound happens to your perception. You slow down time. The impulsive trader lives in a rushed, compressed timeline where every 5-minute candle feels like an eternity of missed opportunities. But the patient trader expands time, allowing the market structure to reveal itself completely, without pressure, without the need for immediate action. Impulse is not edge. Impulse is a hallucination of edge, a psychological trick played by the part of your mind that craves immediate gratification, that fears being left behind, that needs to feel important. We must dissect this craving, because the fear of missing out is nothing more than the fear of letting a perceived future profit slip through your fingers, and that fear is the ultimate enemy of objective truth. The true enemy is not the market or the fear of missing out. It is the ego. The ego needs to be right, needs action, needs to feel competent now. The ego trade is the trade taken not because the statistical edge is present, but because the ego demands validation. It is the trade you take to prove to yourself, or worse, to the screen, that you are still in the game. It is a desperate attempt to avoid the one thing the intermediate trader fears most: irrelevance. When you force a trade, You are attempting to bend the market to your will, trying to impose your narrative onto the price action. The market, of course, does not care about your narrative. It will simply take your money and move on, leaving your ego bruised and your account depleted. Think about the feeling of boredom. Why does waiting feel like suffering? It is because the ego equates activity with productivity. If you are sitting there doing nothing, watching the screen, your internal voice whispers that you are failing, that you are lazy, or that you are missing the boat. We are addicted to the dopamine hit of the entry button. We seek the immediate affirmation of a moving profit and loss statement, even if that movement is negative. This need for constant validation is the psychological anchor chaining you to suboptimal entries. It is the reason you are always hunting for the setup, rather than waiting for the setup to hunt you. That distinction changes everything. The cost of the ego trade is rarely measured in just dollars. It is measured in the destruction of your self-trust. When you break your rules, you teach yourself that your word means nothing. And what happens when you miss a move? That is the critical moment. The price explodes, and your system told you to wait, but the fear of missing out screams in your ear. You feel the sting of lost profit, and that sting is intolerable. So, you chase. You enter late, high above your intended entry point, convincing yourself that the momentum will continue forever. This is the impulse born purely of emotional pain, the attempt to retroactively correct the perceived failure of patience. It turns a potential statistical win into a guaranteed psychological loss. The antidote to this chasing impulse, the antidote to the ego's demand for action, is radical acceptance. You must fundamentally accept that not every move is yours. You are not entitled to every swing high, nor every swing low. The market is an infinite stream of opportunities, and by attempting to grab all of them, you guarantee that you will execute none of them correctly. Radical acceptance means looking at a perfect 100-point rally that you missed and saying, "That move was not for me. My edge was not present. I respect my system." This is paradoxical freedom. When you surrender the need to control the outcome of the next 5 minutes, you gain control over your trading career for the next 5 years. You realize that your job is not to predict the market, but to execute your plan perfectly when the conditions meet your criteria. Waiting is not a passive activity. It is the highest form of active risk management. It is a declaration of confidence in your statistical edge. When you wait, you are proving to yourself that your process is more important than your instantaneous emotional gratification. This is the ultimate act of self-respect. The amateur trader sees waiting as wasted time. The professional understands that the time spent waiting is the time spent earning the right to take the high-probability entry. If you cannot sit still, if the silence of inaction drives you crazy, then you are using trading not as a business, but as a form of emotional entertainment, a constant source of cheap thrills. And the market always charges a massive premium for entertainment. Stop treating your screen like a slot machine that must be constantly fed. Your edge is not found in the frequency of your trades, but in the quality of your decision-making. The most powerful tool you possess is the delete key on your keyboard, used to cancel an impulse entry before it becomes a commitment. Learn to sit comfortably in the space between setups. That empty space is where true profit is born. It is the space where discipline solidifies into character. The final piece of the puzzle, the true secret to mastering the wait, is often realizing you are the biggest distraction. Sometimes the only way to truly learn to wait is to remove the mirror, to remove the market itself from your immediate attention. But how do you trade without watching the price? That is the next step we must take. The paradox is that the moment you remove the charts, your mind screams for input. This is the strategic vacuum. Nature abhors a vacuum, and the trading mind, driven by dopamine and the need for action, will fill that empty space with impulse. It will create a phantom opportunity just so you have something to do. Your job is not to fight the impulse. Your job is to structure the time so the impulse has nowhere to land. A great strategy demands silence, not constant motion. This is the foundation of what we call the anti-greed protocol, turning structured patience into an active trade management tool. You must formalize your inactivity. Schedule your waiting. If your system dictates that the optimal entry window opens at 9:30 a.m. and closes at 11 a.m., what happens from 11:01 a.m. until the next session opens at 2 p.m.? For most traders, that is 2 hours and 59 minutes of self-sabotage potential. This is where the destruction happens. You are bored. You are restless. You see a low probability setup, but your hands move anyway because the alternative is sitting still. Stop treating the downtime as wasted time. Treat it as the most critical part of your process. During these slow periods, you do not stare at the screen waiting for the market to validate your existence. Instead, you perform structured non-market activities. You review the trades you didn't take yesterday. You quantify the exact cost of your impatience. Go through your trading journal, specifically looking at the entries that were rushed, the ones taken 10 seconds too early or 5 minutes too late. Assign a dollar value to that emotional decision. You will find that your biggest losing trades are not systemic failures. They are failures of timing, driven by the desperation to be involved. This is the only way to truly internalize the lesson. Inaction is profitable. But even the best routine fails when the adrenaline hits. The market suddenly moves, and the impulse to jump in before the confirmation is overwhelming. This is where you implement friction, physical, tangible buffer zones designed solely to interrupt the pattern. The simplest is the 60-second rule. When you see a potential setup that meets 90% of your criteria, you must physically stand up, walk to the other side of the room, count to 60, slowly. Do not look at the screen. This small, 60-second separation breaks the immediate connection between the visual signal and the motor command to click the mouse. That movement, that brief mental reset, is the difference between a disciplined entry and a fear of missing out entry. It allows the logical brain half a second to catch up with the emotional one. If you cannot take a small walk or step away for 60 seconds, you have no business risking capital. Why? Because you are admitting you cannot control your own physical response to money. The market is not a casino where you must remain glued to the table. It is a battlefield where the sniper who waits the longest, the one who is comfortable in the silence, usually wins. You must also establish hard stops for your focus. Define your optimal trading window based on volatility and your system's edge, and outside of that window, you must physically shut down the trading platform, not minimize it. Shut it down. If your edge disappears after 11 a.m., then 11:01 a.m. is the time you step away. Go lift weights. Read a book. Do not confuse monitoring the market with trading the market. Monitoring is passive consumption. Trading is active execution. If your system requires 2 hours of waiting between setups, then fill those 2 hours with high-value activities that are not looking at the screen. The greatest challenge for the intermediate trader is recognizing that the biggest strategic advantage they possess is their ability to walk away from the table when the odds shift against them. The strategic vacuum is not filled by more analysis or more indicators. It is filled by structure, routine, and the quantified understanding that your patience has a higher expected value than your impulse. You must learn to value the process of waiting more than the dopamine rush of the trade. But simply having the routine is not enough. You can sit down and follow every rule perfectly, yet still feel that gnawing anxiety, that psychological resistance that makes the routine unbearable. We have built the structure, the anti-greed protocol, but now we must address the core belief that drives the need for constant action, the fear that if you are not doing something, you are losing. That fear is the final, invisible wall, and breaking it requires a complete reframing of how you define risk, which is the only way to truly free yourself from the tyranny of the clock. This tyranny is not just emotional, it is statistical. Every single time you rush an entry, you are performing a statistical error that immediately degrades your edge. You feel like you are gaining control by acting, but mathematically, you are introducing noise into a system that demands clarity. The market does not reward activity, it rewards precision. We are moving beyond feelings now. We are moving into the cold, brutal world of quantifiable cost. Think of your strategy as having a calculated expected value. a positive statistical outcome over a series of trades. A premature entry is poison to this equation. Consider a setup where you normally risk 1 unit to make 3 units, a 3-to-1 risk-to-reward ratio. If you enter just slightly early before the necessary confirmation, you are forced to place your stop-loss wider to accommodate the uncertainty. That wider stop-loss instantly changes your math. If your stop-loss is now 50% larger, your 3-to-1 trade just became a 2-to-1 trade, or worse. You have not just lowered your potential profit, you have fundamentally destroyed the core statistical advantage of your system before the trade has even begun. You took a high probability setup and turned it into a coin flip simply because you could not wait 3 more minutes. This is the power of what we call entry precision. Waiting for that final tick of confirmation, that perfect alignment, is not about being passive. It is the most aggressive form of capital preservation. When your entry is precise, your stop-loss can be tighter. A tighter stop-loss means that for the same absolute dollar move to your take-profit target, your profit factor skyrockets. The professional is a sniper who only pulls the trigger when the target fills the scope. The amateur is a machine gunner spraying capital and hoping something lands. The difference between those two approaches is millions over a career. Are you a sniper or a sprayer? That is the question you must answer with your execution log. But the cost of rushing is twofold. The first is the ruined trade mathematics. The second, and often more insidious, is the opportunity cost of tying up your capital. Every dollar you have locked up in a mediocre, rushed setup is a dollar that cannot be deployed into a 5-star, high expected value setup that might materialize 30 minutes later. You are paying rent on a bad trade. Your margin is finite, and the market's opportunities are infinite. By forcing action, you are essentially saying, this mediocre setup is the best I will ever see, which is the definition of scarcity mindset. You have taken your most valuable resource, your capital, and rendered it inert, holding a position that has a negative statistical expectation because its initial risk to reward was compromised by your impatience. The professional trader defines themselves not by how many trades they take, but by the mathematical rigor applied to the few they execute. They are capital allocators, not gamblers. They execute only when the statistical edge is mathematically verifiable. And they wait because they trust the numbers, not their impulse. The market is always presenting opportunities, but only a few pass the strict filter of positive expected value. Your job is not to trade. Your job is to calculate and wait. Now, I challenge you. Go back over the last month of your trading journal. Identify every trade where you entered early, where you moved your stop-loss wider than planned, or where you tied up capital for more than 4 hours on a setup that failed to move. Quantify the exact dollar cost of your impatience. This is where most traders stop. They refuse to do the math because the number is too painful, and the pain reveals the truth. Your greatest enemy is not the market volatility. It is the refusal to sit still and accept the statistical reality of your own execution. That refusal is the final psychological barrier we must dismantle. That refusal is the final psychological barrier we must dismantle. You refuse to sit still because your body has been wired to equate market movement with immediate action. That wiring is the enemy. It is a biological impulse loop, not a strategic decision based on the chart. To dismantle it, you need a physical interrupt, a hard stop signal that fires before the mouse clicks. This signal must be non-negotiable. It is the moment you recognize the internal heat, the slight tension in your jaw, or the accelerated heartbeat. That feeling is the absolute mandatory signal to pause. We implement this through what we call the 2-minute rule. The moment you feel the urge to deviate from your plan, the moment you feel the fear of missing out starting to bubble up, you must execute the physical withdrawal. Do not argue with the impulse. Do not try to rationalize the setup. You must stand up, physically move away from the desk, walk to a window, look at something distant. This is not meditation. This is interrupting the motor pattern that leads to the click. 2 minutes. That is the duration required for the initial adrenaline spike to subside. You are resetting your internal clock. You are proving to your primitive brain that the perceived threat of missing the move is survivable. The market does not care if you stand up, but standing up changes your state, breaking the hypnotic hold of the screen. Now, we reinforce this with external commitment devices. Before the market even opens, take a sticky note and cover the primary button on your mouse. Write one word on it. Wait. This simple act is a physical barrier that forces a conscious decision to remove it, providing a crucial microsecond of reflection. Simultaneously, you must rehearse indifference. Visualization is key. Spend 5 minutes before the session imagining a perfect setup forming and then dissolving without you entering. Watch it move 50 ticks without you. Feel the slight annoyance, acknowledge it, and then instantly replace that feeling with the relief that you maintained discipline. You are training yourself to view missed opportunities not as losses, but as successful statistical omissions. You are practicing the art of letting money walk away, because money that walks away without violating your rules is money that respects your process. The next level of mastering the pause involves training the nervous system itself. The market tests your patience precisely when you are least equipped, when you are tired, stressed, or emotionally compromised from a previous trade. Your nervous system is already activated. You need a systemic reset. Controlled breathing is a direct physiological tool. Implement a technique where you inhale for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, and exhale slowly for a count of 8. Do this 3 times. This immediately activates the parasympathetic nervous system, the brake pedal of your body. It slows the heart rate and reduces the cortisol spike that drives impulsive behavior. You cannot execute a reckless trade when your body is intentionally moving into a state of stillness. This brings us to the final, most crucial shift in perspective. Your trade trigger is no longer defined solely by price action. It is not just the breakout above resistance or the rejection at support. Your trigger is now defined as price action plus internal calm. If the setup is perfect, but you feel rushed, tense, or desperate, the trigger has not fired. The condition of internal calm is non-negotiable. You are waiting for the confluence of external opportunity and internal readiness. If you are vibrating with excitement, you are not ready. If you are vibrating with fear, you are certainly not ready. The market is designed to exploit your impatience. It will show you the perfect entry right when your attention span is fractured, or right after you took a frustrating small loss. The market tests your patience when you are statistically most likely to fail. Your job is to recognize that the greatest challenge is not reading the chart, but managing the biological response to the chart. The true cost of sitting still is 0. The true cost of clicking too soon is quantifiable ruin. We have mastered the pause. Now, we must master the execution that follows the pause. How to move from absolute stillness to decisive action without hesitation. We mistake stillness for weakness. We confuse constant movement with productivity. But the final, most potent identity shift you must make is this. Waiting is not passivity. Waiting is the ultimate expression of confidence. It is the deep, quiet knowledge that your edge exists, and you are simply allowing the market to come to you. You are not chasing, you are attracting. This requires the final surrender. The surrender of the need to be right. The surrender of the narrative that you must always be doing something to earn your money. The amateur believes they must conquer the market. The professional knows they must conquer themselves. This is the moment where you look at the chart, see a decent setup, and walk away because it is not the setup. That is strength. The market is designed to reward action, but only precise action. If you find yourself clicking trades just to alleviate the internal discomfort of boredom, you are paying the market a tax on your emotional regulation failure. Stop treating the lack of action as a failure of opportunity. Treat it as a victory of discipline. You are not waiting because you are unsure. You are waiting because you are certain. The certainty is not about the outcome of the trade, but the certainty of your statistical edge. You have done the work. The plan is flawless. Now, the only variable left is your patience. And your ego hates patience. Your ego whispers, "You are wasting time. Look at what you are missing." It is a lie. That is the fear of missing out talking. When you are sitting in a trade or waiting for a trade, the clock itself seems to break. Minutes stretch into hours. This is the physiological reality of trading. Your body is pumping stress hormones, demanding resolution, demanding a conclusion. You are experiencing time dilation. The market is not moving slowly. Your internal clock is running too fast. You must learn to slow your breath, slow your mind, and synchronize your internal clock back to real time. If the setup requires 30 minutes of confirmation, those 30 minutes must feel like 30 minutes of meditation, not 30 minutes of internal torture. What are you actually waiting for? You are waiting for the market to prove your thesis before you commit capital. This brings us to the zero trade day. Too many traders see a zero trade day as a failure, a day where they didn't make money. This is the wrong metric. A zero trade day is often the most profitable day of your month because you successfully defended your capital against mediocre opportunity. You successfully held the line. Capital defense is the ultimate offensive strategy. Every time you refrain from taking a low probability trade, you are compounding your discipline. You are increasing your statistical likelihood of being ready and fully funded for the high probability trade when it finally appears. You are proving to yourself, trade by trade, non-trade by non-trade, that you are the master of your own execution. This is the difference between gambling and professional speculation. The gambler needs action. The professional needs validation. Patience is not a passive virtue. It is the disciplined knowledge that you possess the edge and are waiting for the market to validate it with undeniable price action. When the conditions meet your criteria, the waiting stops instantly. The decision to execute must be immediate, cold, and robotic. There is no hesitation because all the hesitation was used up during the waiting period. You pre-resolved the action. Your waiting was the preparation. Remember this simple truth. Your capital is a soldier. Do not send it into battle until the enemy is already defeated by the terrain. But how do you make that switch from absolute stillness to that decisive, zero hesitation click? That moment when the setup finally arrives is where most traders panic and freeze. Mastery over self is the prerequisite for mastery over the market. The ultimate goal is not profit, but the attainment of an unconquerable soul, a fortress against external volatility. For those committed to dismantling the internal barriers that betray their edge, the 2025 edition of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, translated by Rowan Ashworth, is the indispensable companion. It is the definitive text on building the psychological infrastructure required for professional speculation. To secure your copy of this essential volume and begin the process of internal governance, a link is provided in the description below. Subscribe now, like this video, and leave a comment. By doing that, you help more people see this message, and you let me know this work is not in vain.